Okay, dear colleagues, we are starting the next session. It's a really great pleasure for us all to welcome the Vice Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic Integration, Olga Stefanishyna, with us. Olga is a steady participant of the previous forums. In previous 3 forums, I think she was a participant in her previous capacity of the head of the governmental office for European and Euro-Atlantic integration of Ukraine. Now, as a Vice Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic integration, it's really a very good pleasure and message how important this event is for Ukrainian government and how important the discussion about European integration and trio cooperation towards European Union integration is for us all. So it's really a big pleasure, and without making big introduction, I think that we discussed with Olga that we organized this small session in this way, that first she will convey a short speech, like 7 minutes, right? Something like this, and then we will have some time still for questions and answers with the audience. So the idea of this session is to make a conversation indeed. So I hope it will be as much interactive as possible. So please follow closely and prepare your questions in advance so that we have a really fruitful discussion. So Olga, what's your assessment where we are with our way on implementing the association agreement, where we are with our implementing our goal, constitutional goal of coming closer to membership in the European Union? What's your assessment of the summit, of last summit, EU-Ukraine bilateral summit, which took place a little bit more than a week ago, which was already reflected by some speakers in the previous panel? And maybe you could also say about your expectations from the Eastern Partnership Summit, which is coming up in the end of this year, and your ideas on cooperation in the trio format is very welcome. So please, floor is yours.
Thank you, Dima. Well, first of all, I feel like home. You know, this is already the 4th forum in a very warm company of Ukrainian, Moldovan, and Georgian colleagues. So it's a great pleasure that still we managed to have the physical events and to have the real physical exchange on the issues which are really highly on the agenda in our countries, but also in the other capitals. So I would of course start with the most interesting questions which has been posed to all the politicians in Ukraine is about the membership perspective. It was an interesting format that over this summit this year, this issue has been directly discussed at the plenary session by the presidents, and following the public communication and the press conference. I think that there is one very important message that should be underlined, is that there is a growing understanding that European Union should mobilize the debate on this issue. So it's really important that the recognition of the reforms and progress and advancement of Ukraine and EU relations is also an engine which grows the demand within European Union to give clear answers to the questions we are putting, which are already enshrined in our constitution. So it's also a good signal from both sides. First of all, it's a good signal showing that Ukraine is steadily progressing with democratic transformations. So comparing to the let's say, I mean, the last, maybe even the whole period of implementation of the agreement, we always had a number of concerns, but this year there were a number of significant elements which really boosted thinking, how can EU better address the expectations and aspirations of Ukraine? First of all, we made the joint assessment separately, but we made the assessment of implementation of the agreement for the whole 5 years, which has been rather positive. So basically, Ukraine has progressed for in more than half of the whole volume of legal approximation and regulatory approximations in all sectors, which is like more than 25 sectors covered by the association agreement. So EU is steadily one of the largest trading partners, while Ukraine has taken a significant share of different markets in European Union, and this is already the reality. Ukraine has become a strong contributor into the debates related to implementation of the European Green Deal policy. Basically, EU has the dialogue only with like Canada, Japan, China, and Ukraine on the Green Deal. So it's very important for us that we are not, like, as I suppose to say very often, so we're not in the menu, but we're sitting over the table. It's really important for us that Ukraine has become the digital transformations champion, which has been already confirmed by the recognition of Ukrainian COVID certificates, which means also the recognition of the protection of personal data, security of the telecommunication systems, and etc. So that brings our relations to understanding that we're already at the same level in many things, and we're not the partner to which EU only gives support. We are equal partners having equal dialogue. And this has already been very much discussed over the summit. That brought the dialogue on the other dimension and other level. And of course, as it's called, I don't know how is that correct in English, but the turbo regime that has been launched by Ukrainian parliament in the beginning of its term has been spread also to the government and the other branches of power. So our synchronization in the European track has brought us to a very good results. We have completed the reform of decentralization. We have completed and launched the land reform, the banking reform. And finally, I mean, 2.5 years after the beginning of the president's term, we are very steadily moving in terms of the reform of judiciary and anti-corruption. So we're completing the institutional framework, the legal framework, and basically there are some, let's say, institutions who have already gained the authority of those reformed, like Supreme Court, like Anti-Corruption Court, like the National Agency for Prevention of Corruption. And just today, before I joined the forum, three foreign ambassadors to Ukraine, the US, British, and EU ambassadors, released an article in Ukrainian media referring to a strong and steady progress and the window of opportunity to keep on going through the reform of justice. So this is a very positive background to the discussions we had over the summit. And this has grew the demand for European Union to give a more strong address than just saying, as it was usually, keep on reforming yourselves, you're doing everything for yourselves. So we have risen a bit higher on the agenda. But the other issue which was really important, that the dialogue we had over the summit was a very political one. So we were not only concentrating on a very technical and specific issues. This was the dialogue between European leaders, which is like whereas Ukrainian president is also treated as a European leader and the one having a strong contacts with the leaders in other capitals, like French president, like other presidents who are very well known to you. And it was really important because this was already the fourth visit of the President of European Council to Ukraine in the course of the last, of this year, only of this year. So there's like a lot of personal commitment and friendship between Ukrainian and EU leaders. So this spirit was also preserved over the summit. And all of these issues has led to boosting the issues which are really in my mandate as a Deputy Prime Minister for European integration, which are related to economic integration and political association. So we have we have agreed that we will launch a number of discussions on concluding these separate agreements, like the agreement on liberalization of transit between Ukraine and European Union, which has been boosted as one of the problems caused by growing exports from Ukraine to EU, because our transporters has become a huge new market, and the whole set of new opportunities has opened before them, and everything was really good before the European countries started to defend their markets. And this has been a very complicated process, so we decided to legalize this process in a framework of a separate agreement. We also made a historical signature of the Common Aviation Area Agreement. And as a Deputy Prime Minister, I was immediately thinking, how do we have to preserve this window of opportunity, this incentive for international players to believe in the new opportunity given to Ukraine by steady implementation of the agreement. But I also feel the immediate effect after this signature. The Wizz Air operator has already announced that they are opening 26 new routes from the 4 cities of Ukraine. And just last week I was in Ukrainian airport Borispol, and I was informed that the F terminal, which has been closed since Euro 2012, is reopening because of the high demand. So it's really the immediate effect of something which has been signed just a week ago. We also put a lot of attention into 2 other things. We think that the next year should be the year of digital agenda between Ukraine and European Union, and we hope that over the next year there will be a decision to give the internal market treatment for Ukrainian digital and telecommunication services. So we are very much there. Our legislation is already officially confirmed as compliant with the European, with the EU acquis, and etc. So this would be the very strong decision which would boost, again, small and medium enterprises development, but also production of different types of services between European Union and EU. And the other very important thing, which has been, I think, not very much noticed, but this is something which is really important, that it was the first time when European Commission has officially confirmed its support to synchronization of Ukrainian electricity networks with an integration of Ukrainian electricity network operator to NSOE. This is the union of these operators in European Union, which constitutes the one market approach. So far, European Union has never agreed to put this political message into the declaration and even to discuss it over the format of the summit or any other fora. So this year has been marked by the official political position of the European Union that they support this synchronization. For us, it's a very good element because this would really boost the whole process of decarbonization, but Ukraine would really take a significant share of European market because of the growing demand in electricity related to the decarbonization in European Union. So we think that this would be a very strong incentive for demonopolization of our market, for its development and implementation of the law on de-oligarchization, which is very popular to be discussed here. So I think that this would be this was the really brief overview of the spirit of the discussions we had, and in this spirit we are also moving towards participation in the Eastern Partnership Summit. There's also an idea that Ukrainian, Georgia, and Moldovan prime ministers would come and have a number of meetings in the format of the association trio at the level of prime ministers ahead of the Eastern Partnership Summit. But it's also important that European Union has formally has formally recognized this initiative, and this would definitely be discussed. For us, I think it's important now to materialize this political commitment to establish this trio format into very practical things. One of them, I think, is just right now being agreed between Ukraine and Georgia, because in Tbilisi we are having the joint economic commission meeting with some members of our government, and there is agreement to launch a number of infrastructural projects which would boost trade and exchange between our countries. And I think that this is exactly the dimension which should be looked through, especially in light of the fact that this Eastern Partnership Summit will be marked by presentation of the huge investment program launched by European Union. And I think that in the format of this trio, this is the target which we should preserve until there is a willingness from European Union to go into deeper, concrete and more political discussions related to enlargement.
Great. Thank you very much for this really very substantive speech. Short overview of how many things we are having on the EU-Ukrainian's agenda and also on the Eastern Partnership, and just hinting of how many things we can develop together. I'm asking now the audience. We have colleagues, correct me how much time. Do we have some, like 10 minutes, right? Correct? 10 minutes. 10 minutes for the discussion. So please raise your hands, indicate that you want to ask questions. Michael, please.
Thank you very much. Dear Deputy Prime Minister, dear Olga, that was already a very rich story that you gave us. You didn't even have time to go into something else very important that you're doing, namely representing Ukraine in the Green Deal, Green Transition task force, which you shared with Katerina Martinovna. I must say, as an outsider, we very much appreciate that at your last session, you published quite clear account of your discussion. So that was admirable element of transparency there. But there is a couple of points there, however. I wonder whether you could comment on more detail here and now. You discussed the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, the CBAM, and your published note says in rather anodyne terms, the EU stated its position and Ukraine stated its position, broadly speaking. Can you tell us how far you've got in identifying the conditions under which Ukraine might be exempt from this possible mechanism? That's one thing. And the other thing was very interesting indeed, that it was agreed to establish a financing platform, as the language used, which is very interesting. Can you tell us a bit more how that will be organized, and at one point it might be mentioning numbers? One final other point on transport, and road transport in particular, I think you talked about a new agreement will be made. Does this concern the trucking quotas? Is that what it's about? Because that's very good news if it is so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's collect questions if there are many, if there are more. I see Leo is raising hand, and if there's any more question, please just raise your hand so that I see you.
I should put notes then.
Yeah. My question is short. Thank you for this opportunity to ask a question. You mentioned a lot of things happening between Ukraine and the EU, very wide amount of processes, but many people like me ask what is the next big thing happening between Ukraine and the EU in the nearest future, because we had visa liberalization, which was a big thing. Now we have aviation, common aviation space, finally. What is the next big thing? Is ACA, is Green Deal? What is something which would re-energize and would basically mobilize us, you know, on our dialogue with EU? Thank you.
Thank you. And any more questions? No? I think there are already enough for 10 minutes. Okay, final question from Pater.
Yeah, Madam Prime Minister, maybe I would repeat and put a similar question what I put to the first panelists at first during the first session. The question is about associated trio. You talked quite in length. As I was reading recently, but this is a statement of High Representative Borrell, who said that a crucial aspect of our Eastern Partnership, and one can replace that with trio, is building, I'm replacing that with trio, is building links not only between the European Union and our partner countries, but also among them, among the partners themselves. So you were talking about associated trio, which is absolutely a locomotive for all of us, of course, to move forward on the path of EU integration for all these three countries. But to your perspective, what the associated trio has done already in terms of coordinating among each other, what are the projects? Perhaps that would be a complement to the previous questions. Can you talk of a bit about what we could expect, what kind of practicalities we could expect, among Moldova, Ukraine, and Georgia, in order, they to move forward and show to the European Union that indeed united they are becoming stronger? Thank you.
So we have CBAM, Financial Platform for Green Deal, Transit Agreement, as I understand, Road Transport Transit Agreement, if I understand correctly. Next big thing for EU-Ukraine relationship, and what trio has done already, and what we can expect from the trio in practical terms. So easy questions for.
Okay,
7 minutes.
Thank you, Michael, for mentioning the Green Deal dialogue. Indeed, it has been a very important process, and it also refers to something which Leo was saying about what is next big thing, this is exactly about how EU works. EU is never in a hurry. You cannot just have this kind of decisions. That's why this dialogue was really evolving and longly established. But then when we have it structured and permanent, it really affects the internal transformations in Ukraine. So first of all, we have initiated the consultations under the association agreement on the carbon border adjustment mechanism, so which is also provided by the agreement that in case other party is about to release some measures, we can launch these consultations. And we launched these consultations in a very friendly but rather strong manner, saying that it really affects our national interest. It would be a trade measure. It would limit our trade, and basically it's not in line with the spirit of the agreement. What we see and we have been strongly integrated into the policy-making process, which is something really new. It's not about the fact that we were just raising our concerns. We were integrated in the policy-making process. We had the opportunity to present our arguments, our vision, and I think that this really also affected the final decision which has been presented to the parliament. There are no exemptions for anybody, but there are conditions that special treatment should be done to those countries with which EU has free trade areas, or those countries who are the members of energy community. In Ukrainian case, it is both, and it means that there will be no immediate application of this measure to Ukraine, but there will be an equivalency calculation. For example, in Ukraine, we have this carbon tax, but it is the lowest one in Europe. So maybe by raising this carbon tax, we will have this equivalency recognition. And I think that this is one of the victories I'm really proud of having it in my portfolio. So, and about financial platform, it's also a very important thing, because just in 2 weeks I will lead Ukrainian delegation to Glasgow, the COP26 annual conference under the Paris Agreement, and we will represent our second nationally determined contribution, which is rather ambitious and under which we committed to cut our carbon, our emissions and up to 35% from the level of 1990. Sorry, I usually speak Ukrainian on this issue. So, but what is important that the calculations we have done, that implementation of this ambition would require the annual mobilization of resources in amount of 10 billion euros per 1 year. So, and basically we have these resources. These are the resources of private investors, of international investors, credits, and the investments which will be released at the Eastern Partnership Summit. But what is important is the right utilization and right coordination. That's why we established, together with the European Union, this financial platform, which will include all the donors who are the individual countries, but also international financial institutions, and we will coordinate our work related to implementation of this nationally determined contribution. And I think that this would really affect both from our side the clarity in the financial framework, but also it would increase the utilization of those resources we already have, because as I was mentioning previously, from all the amount of the credit portfolio we have, for example, with European Investment Bank, we utilize only 17%. So, and this is something which is not very good. So this platform will serve also this goal. Then Leo was asking about the next big thing. Well, and yes, so it is the agreement we are going to discuss to resolve this problem on transit permits. And we are planning to have the first consultations on this problematic issue already in the second part of November. So I really just want to speak about the next big thing, it really depends, because whether the things you were mentioning, they are big enough to be considered big, basically, because they would really have a very strong effect, whether we're talking about ACA agreement, or in the beginning of this year, we will be invited to join the Customs Transit Convention. It's already there, and many other things. But would they really, give us all the sense of the big thing? This is already part of normality, and I hope also that very soon we will have the first review and trade liberalization. So this really a very big things, for Ukrainian government, because this is really the success stories. This is something we're doing, but is that really big enough to be considered beef? I think that all of these big things were already shaped in the summit declaration. So, and then it's like about implementation. And I think what could be the next big thing is putting Ukraine over the table, and we started to mobilize this discussion. Over the summit, we presented the concept paper on the energy security in Europe, and it wasn't the concept paper about Ukraine, and how Nord Stream 2 affects Ukraine. I think that even those who are blind already know the position of Ukraine, but we were trying to show the bigger picture. We were trying to show how many countries who are members of European Union, including, but also Georgia, also Moldova and Ukraine, have been subjected for the gas blackmailing from Russia for the last 2 decades. So we should not close our eyes, and we should not ignore the fact that the ambitions Russia is targeting is not to work individually with the whole countries, but to capture the whole European Union. And we And we presented this document, and we suggested to launch the whole European debates at the level of the heads of states and government, where Ukraine would contribute and we be able to present its arguments. And I think that these are the really big things. When our country is over one table and we're all together the policy process, and we're all in a process of policy planning. I think this is important, but the really game changer could be when, as it was in 2008, Poland and Sweden, who initiated the Eastern Partnership, when the leadership will be restored in European Union, and there will be other member states who will say, guys, we should start talking, we should have the debate, and I think that this would be a game-changing thing, which would really boost 3 times everything which is happening here. I put a lot of hopes to France, although France is really skeptical about any enlargement, whether it's NATO or EU, but France is very ambitious, and they are really committed to present the reform of the European Union. And the clarity in the reform of the European Union itself would really affect the other level of the debates. So I think that this could be the big thing, not only in terms from the perspective of Kyiv's view to Brussels, but also how Brussels can launch that. While it is already clear that Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova, and I can put a stamp on this position on a Ukrainian behalf, that our commitment is undoubtable and our willingness to deliver is very clear. So the next big thing is now in Brussels, I guess. And there was a question about the association trio. Well, basically, I tried to cover it already. I think that now we're in a phase of political inception, political settlement. But I think that if this format is preserved and survived and enshrined into different levels, from prime ministers, parliaments, ministers, and etc., it will become really effective by bringing more incentives on different projects. For example, as I mentioning, there is already a bilateral discussion between Georgia and Ukraine on launching a number of infrastructural projects. So I think that it would be like a sector-by-sector approach where we can form the unified vision on some issues. But also I think that as a personal idea from myself, because I'm in charge of the review of the association agreement, at the second stage of this review, we will launch the debate on the review of the provisions related to alcoholic productions and winery. Because back in 2007, when we concluded the agreement, I don't know the history, how was it, but we're really in a bad situation, I mean, with these conditions. And I think that this would be also interesting for Georgia and for Moldova. So we can have the unified position on that. We have a strong business community and strong association here, and they are really committed. They have the examples and visions. So we have this position, and if we are united in advocating for that, I think that 3 voices is much stronger than only 1 voice. So I don't think that we should really start considering the very comprehensive approach, but staying politically together would really affect a smaller changes and a smaller things.
Thank you very much. Really very good and interesting discussion. And I observe from unfortunately, we don't have more time. Lunch is waiting for us, and thanks God we have a warm, sunny day, so you can enjoy this lunch over at the terrace with beautiful Kiev scene around you. And just my observation from the previous discussions and from eventually what we have heard about the next big thing, I see that the question of energy security coming up very prominently and probably the highest on the agenda. We understand that now Moldova is now under very immediate threat of energy, with the issues related to energy security. We understand that winter is coming. Today is sunny, warm day, but winter is coming, and we'll see what it will bring to us. And we'll see what will be the result of this winter for the upcoming years, and what rules of the European energy market will be there, whether the biggest supplier will abuse the market and ask and push forward exemptions and so on, whether Nord Stream 2 will be operational and under what conditions, if it will be operational. So I think that this, I mean, my personal observation that this is the biggest thing what we are looking forward in the just immediate future. But of course, the perspective is very interesting. So I have two suggestions from our conversation. First, for the trio, probably we can think about associated trio wine forum to take place. I don't know. I mean, we can suggest about practical cooperation, practical projects in this regard.
I immediately self-commit to organize it.
To come and participate. Great.
In Odessa.
Great. And second, when at this association trio wine forum we can write and agree on the time when we submit the application to the European Union. If you're interested, I just would like to remember that civil society in Ukraine already in 2015 made such an informal step. We, at the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Conference, in parallel to the Eastern Partnership Summit in 2015, we submitted such an informal letter of application for the membership in the European Union. So text is there, basically. When you see that there is a political condition ready with some member states, we can push it through and have a cooperation here. And of course, first of all, coming back to what we heard from previous panel, first of all, we need to concentrate on our homework. We hope that in the nearest future, we will talk less about problems in our homework menu, but more about our joint perspective and big things on our in our path towards the membership, full-fledged membership in the EU. So thank you very much again for coming and participating, and lunch break. Thank you.